An independent neuro sideline physician has been fired by the NFLPA over the Tua concussion issue. What does that mean? There's at least two significant potential fallouts from this action. This is Dr. David Chao, Pro Football Doc at Sports Injury Central, SICScore.com. I was a head team physician in the NFL for 17 years. The concussion thing all came about and was morphing into shape that it is today. We dealt with independent neuros on the sideline, the UNC, the Red Hats, and video replays, and the concussion thing was coming to a boil. Full disclosure, I was a head team physician and an orthopedist, so I did not personally do the head injury exams, but ultimately I was responsible for the medical staff, so was involved. So here's the situation. First of all, the fallout may be, number one, what does this mean for Tua? Number two, what does this mean for the Miami Dolphins? I'll explain. If indeed this now signals that a mistake was made and Tua was concussed on Sunday before the Thursday, this means this indeed is a second concussion. Now this is if, right? We don't know yet. All we know is that the Red Hat was fired. If this means Tua had a second concussion, that means he will not be back for the Miami Dolphins for a while, regardless of exam. General rule of thumb. Now, there are exceptions, but best practices, general rule of thumb. First concussion, out at least a week. Second concussion in the same season, out at least a month. And that's a second concussion, not a second concussion within 4 days. And if there's a third one, out for the season. So if this finding by the PA means a mistake was made, i.e. Tua shouldn't have been let back into the game because he had a concussion, this means the Dolphins will be without their starting quarterback for at least a month. We don't know that to be a fact yet. The second fallout is if the UNC erred and deserved to be fired, what implications does that have for the Miami Dolphins physicians? The NFLPA does not have power over the Miami Dolphins physicians. They could seek an investigation of the Miami Dolphins physicians, but right now they've just investigated the circumstances. But if the UNC failed, the natural question is, did Dolphins physicians fail? I'm not saying they did, but that's the next fallout question. Let me explain the whole process. For every game, there's at least 3 UNCs there. One on each sideline, one up in the booth, in the eye in the sky, spotting with the athletic trainer eye in the sky. One of these UNCs has now been, quote, fired. Now, they're appointed through the head, neck, and spine committee, but it has to be approved by the NFLPA and NFL. So at any point in time, the NFL or NFLPA can withdraw support. I find the language interesting about firing. It's not like they're hired under contract. They're independent contractors. They get paid, I recall it was about $1,500 per game. Maybe it's more today. I've been out of the league for a little bit. They show up and they're, trained and they have to do their duty. They all have independent practices. They're not just, their career and job is not with the NFL or NFLPA. They have full-time neurology, neurosurgery, otherwise head injury practices in the communities of the NFL, and they're appointed. So of course they could be unappointed. I find the language interesting that they were fired. Were they really fired because there's something wrong, or the NFLPA withdraw its endorsement? Firing, has a different intonation. In any case, that's the big curious thing here. Is this signaling that Tua indeed had a concussion, which has its repercussions, or were there some steps not followed that in terms of the protocol? Did the NFLPA feel like everything was done okay, but perhaps the UNC should have advocated more for the player? We don't know. Or there was a report from NFL Network that there was some hostility from this UNC, i.e., I don't know, maybe hostility like, hey, I was there, I did this, why are you double checking me? You don't trust me? And that was interpreted negatively by the NFLPA. Moving on. Quite honestly, for a $1,500 sideline gig, sure, it's kind of fun to go to an NFL game, but that was a very, very hot game and you're in the sun. Sometimes maybe the UNC just doesn't even want to do it anymore. Maybe that was part of the hostility. If you're going to look over my shoulder like this, I don't want to do it anymore. Who knows? But there's usually a small pool of UNCs and they rotate around because there's vacations and people have other things or they can't make it or they're on call. But there's 3 at every game. So the bottom line is much to learn here. I'm glad the league has said that as soon as they finish the investigation, they'll let us all know. It sounds like the NFLPA found something, whether it was an egregious violation, didn't feel like the UNC was advocating enough, technical violations, or just attitude for the hostility. They have the right and they have moved on. They don't have the right to move on from the Dolphins' positions. I'm not saying that fallout will come, but that's interesting. But the biggest question that begs here is was this to a second concussion on Thursday? Or was it his first concussion? If it was his first one, because there's 10 days till the next game, it's not impossible for him to get cleared. Although, statistically, he might sit out a game. But if it's his second one, he's going to be out for a month. And of course, it also depends on symptoms. Like he could be out for a month or longer if he continues to have headaches and what have you. And by the way, the other thing I saw was there were some comments from people about why did he get put on a plane? I mean, why was he allowed to fly? He was released from the hospital. If he was hospitalized, it would be observation. He was put on the Dolphins charter, being observed by 3 team physicians at least, 5 athletic trainers at least, and a physical therapist. That's better observation than in a hospital. If something were to happen, I'm sure they could land the plane. The other thing is, some people gave the team grief. Why are we giving him screen time? Why is he watching MacGruber, the movie with the head coach? Look, the days of putting someone in a dark, quiet room to treat a concussion are gone. Yeah, you probably don't want to work on an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, you probably don't want to do computer work. Yeah, you probably don't want to watch film. But a comedy movie, it seems low stress. And of course, if it gave him symptoms, he should stop. Probably was okay. Nothing wrong with that. What I find more unusual, and maybe this is a good sign, that he sat next to his head coach to watch the movie. In my time in the NFL, I've never heard of that happening, sitting next to the head coach like that. That's interesting in and of itself. In any case, let's find out more what's happened with this unprecedented firing, quote firing of the UNC. I'm sure more to come. And let's look at the 2 potential fallout, what it means for Tua and or the Dolphins, and let's let it sort itself out before we point any fingers. This is Dr. David Chao, Sports Injury Central. Thanks for watching.